Με περηφάνεια καλωσορίζουμε τον κύριο Δημήτρη Λογοθέτη στο Kiamidis Manihani από το Σικάγο, όπου διακρίνεται για τις προσπάθειές του να ενισχύσει την ύπαρξη του ελληνισμού. Για 40 χρόνια είχε καριέρα με τον διεθνή οίκο Ernst & Young, υπεύθυνος για πολυεθνικές εταιρείες. Θα δούμε τι έχει δημιουργήσει για τον ελληνισμό. Επίσης, τι νομίζει για την οικονομία και τις επιπτώσεις των αλλαγών που επέρχονται με την εκλογή του νέου Προέδρου. Η παρουσίαση είναι μόνο για πληροφόρηση και δεν αποτελεί πρόσκληση για επένδυση. Hi! Today we welcome to Kiamidis Manihani Mr. Dimitri Logothetis from Chicago, a distinguished member of the Greek-American community who spent 40 years with the international firm of consultants Ernst & Young. He has been the founder of the Hellenic American Academy Foundation and the Foundation for Hellenic Education and Culture. Interesting to note his views on the change that the new president will bring about on matters like tariffs, inflation, debt, unemployment, trade wars, and cash. The presentation is designed to be for information only and does not constitute invitation to invest.
I would like to welcome Jim Logothetis from Chicago. It is a great honor because he is known for his passion to promote and preserve Hellenism. Welcome to Kiamidis Manihani, where an effort is being made also to educate and give information to the Greek diaspora around the world on financial matters. Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Kiamidis. I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
Your name is known for being somebody who knows what his mission is. You are known for the passion to promote the mission, and it centers around a few of your activities like the Hellenic American Academy, the Foundation of Hellenic Education and Culture, and the American College of Greece. How large are they? What are their objectives and missions? And how much of your time is it taking? It would be very useful to hear and start like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start with the American College of Greece, which is an organization that I served 9 years on its board. I actually stepped down recently. I served as chairman of the board of trustees for almost 4 years. The institution is located in Athens. Eventually, in 1920, after the catastrophe of Smyrna, it moved to Athens, and from its original location at the old Ellinikon, the airport, it has moved to its current location where we educate nearly 5,000 students. The institution is the largest not-for-profit private university, college and university, as well as a high school and more recently an elementary school. It's a fabulous institution, and it's getting more and more recognized also by the diaspora. We have the largest study abroad program where we attract not only children of the diaspora, but others that are interested in studying in Greece. So I'm very proud of that experience. With regards to my involvement with Hellenic and Orthodox institutions in the United States, let me start with an organization called Leadership 100, more specifically the Archbishop Iakovos Endowment Fund for Orthodoxy and Hellenism in America. That organization has been around for 40 years. We just celebrated our 40th anniversary. We have over 1,300 members. Each has made a commitment and has paid $100,000 towards this endowment fund. We currently have about $120 million in assets, and we spend or contribute the earnings every year, approximately $4 to $5 million, to support the national ministries of the Archdiocese and to support Orthodox and Hellenic causes. My other involvement is, as you mentioned, with the Foundation for Hellenic Education and Culture. It's a foundation based out of Chicago, I'm a founding member going back 20 years ago, and what we do there is we support mostly schools, elementary schools, including the Hellenic American Academy, where I serve as chairman of the Board of Trustees, and we advance Hellenism, the Hellenic language, culture, and our history. And in general, I'm very involved with almost every organization that focuses on Hellenism and Orthodoxy in America. I also chair the Committee for Greek Education of the Archdiocesan Council of the United States.
The endowment fund that you mentioned, is it funded by the Greek Americans in the area with the idea, or
Yeah.
not
Yeah,
internationally, simply the area Greek Americans? Yeah.
Yeah, the Leadership 100, the endowment fund, is funded by individuals primarily in the United States, and the Foundation for Hellenic Education and Culture that I mentioned is also founded or funded by Greek Americans. That one, I might say, primarily from the Midwest, as most of the organizations that we support are in the Midwest.
Yes. This has given me an idea to start something similar by forming a trust in, say, somewhere like Switzerland, where funds from the Greek diaspora around the world, who I know a lot of them, are very excited. The initial feedback is that they will be very excited to be part of an effort to accumulate a big fund, very much in the way that you are operating in the States. All this following the passion to help Hellenism, realizing that it has a lot to offer, and especially if you come from Cyprus, you feel that you need to do something about Hellenism, because you are in further danger if you are Greek. But what is the future of Hellenism in USA? Do you predict it will grow from strength and strength? Are there any challenges on the way? Are you happy the way it is going? How influential are the Greek Americans? A lot of questions.
Sure. Let me start, first of all, to congratulate you and your colleagues who are thinking about such a fund. A global fund to support Hellenism is critical at this point, in my opinion. Let me give you kind of the status of Hellenism in the United States and my views going forward. The reality is that in the United States, we are now in the third, fourth, even fifth generation, and many of those generations that are more, let's say, distant from the immigrants have less and less interest in staying connected, in learning the language, and for the most part, do not know much about our history, our culture, although some of them have the desire to learn. There's probably, I'm a numbers guy. I was a partner in the accounting firm of Ernst & Young for 40 years. And so I look at the numbers as a good indication of the current status and direction. When we look at our numbers in the United States, there's lots of big numbers thrown around about the millions of people that are living, Greek Americans that are living in the United States. The reality is that we, based on the census of 10 years ago, we are less than 1 million people that have somehow indicated that they have a connection back to Greece or Cyprus. The reality also is that there's only 100,000 stewards in the Church of America. A steward is someone who not only attends church, but makes it a point to to become a member, to make a contribution to the church. So our numbers are small. There's probably less than 100,000 people in the United States, like myself, that were born and raised in Greece or Cyprus. So the numbers are dwindling. In terms of the future, the most important thing is that we need, in my opinion anyway, we need to promote Hellenic education. Our schools in the United States are dwindling, and we have less and less of the young people that are learning our history, our language, our culture, and so on. And a lot of that has to do with lack of funding. The Greeks Greeks and Cypriots, all of us Hellenes in the United States, have become excessively successful in so many ways. Financially, we're doing very, very well, but we have not invested. We have not made Hellenism a priority. And even our churches are challenged, but there we're doing relatively well. And so funding is a critical component. Engagement is incredibly important. And there are other specific challenges that we have here. You know, for example, as much as we are, many of us are trying to promote Hellenic education at all levels, from elementary all the way through college, we don't have teachers to teach the Greek language. Those that came to the United States as immigrants many years ago are now retired. We have very few young new immigrants coming as teachers. And of course, we really don't have any education of higher learning in the United States to train teachers in the Greek language and culture. And so there's a number of challenges. I would like to be very optimistic about the future, but I'm afraid that from a realistic point of view, it's a big challenge. Obviously, we have not given up. I'm not giving up, but we have to have a sense of urgency, and we have to work very diligently to make sure that Hellenism survives, and not only in America, but around the world, because needless to say, we have contributed so much to Western civilization, to Western society, and everything that's good in the world today.
Do you feel that the Trump administration's policies will be helpful for Hellenism, Greece and Cyprus? Or is it too early to say yet?
I'm a realist. I'm a realist. What I do know is that when we look at history, at least since the Cyprus invasion, perhaps even further back to the catastrophe of Smyrna and so many other situations critical to Greece and Cyprus, there are 435 congressional districts in the United States. The Greek-American element makes up less than 0.5% overall, and in none of these districts do we represent more than 1% of the voting population. Moreover, the Greek Americans are not as active as they need to be with politicians. In the United States, perhaps the world, but certainly in the United States, those that choose to run for political office need to accumulate and spend tremendous amounts of money. As you might have read, the candidate Harris spent $1.25 billion in her campaign over a 6-week period, I believe. And so to run for Congress here is a $10 to $15 million effort. To run for Senate, it's between 25 and 100 million. And the politicians count on those that contribute. And in our community, I'm afraid to say that with few exceptions, specific to individuals where it's, let's say, beneficial to those who are contributing, I'm afraid to say that very few, if any, truly contribute to these politicians for the benefit of Greece and Cyprus. And therefore, our influence in the United States is relatively minor. Obviously, we're still trying. I always give credit to those that are trying. There are a few, and they ought to be commended and recognized, but on an overall basis, it's not sufficient.
On that thought, let's turn to
the... If I didn't answer your question, in terms of Trump, I'm sorry, in terms of the Trump administration, I hope that they take another look at the Cyprus issue, our positioning vis-a-vis Turkey and the Aegean. I'm relatively optimistic. I know some members of the Trump administration. There's even an outside chance that I might serve at some capacity, more of an economic or financial role. I did serve for 1 year in the previous Trump administration.
To turn to the economics in USA, we're going to have some protectionist policies, tariffs. Some of them may work, some of them may not work. What is your opinion? Is it going to create inflation, reduce inflation? Is it going to happen at all? I mean, it has happened in the past. tariffs were imposed. They were successful in certain respects. They were not successful in other respects, because it depends, do you impose tariffs on the finished imported goods or the secondary, the spare parts needed to create something in the States? What is your opinion on the possibility of
Sure.
imposing tariffs?
Yeah, so I did my MBA at the University of Chicago. And one thing I clearly remember from that time and since then is the University of Chicago School of Economics, where I studied. And it included people like economists like Milton Friedman. Always we were taught that free market economy is the way to go. And so with that in the background, I realized that tariffs are necessary. I believe that they're necessary in certain situations. You know, for example, the president-elect announced just yesterday that he will be, and his administration will impose tariffs 25% on everything imported from Mexico and Canada, and 10% from everything imported from China.
Yes.
He specifically stated that those tariffs will be to force those countries to address the issue of fentanyl, which is the #1 killer of young people in the United States, has been for at least 10 years now. These deadly drugs that come in, and also to have those countries, especially Mexico and to some extent Canada, address the issue of illegal immigration. So when you look at that, on the one hand, you say it's a necessary, you might say it's a necessary policy to support the objective of reducing illegal immigration and reducing the imports of fentanyl, the deadly drugs that come in. On the other hand, there's no question about it, at least in the short term, they will increase the cost of products that come in from those countries, especially China. Now, that is, you know, the whole concept here is to address a certain specific issue. A trade zone, a trade agreement should have fair trade policies, that is operating in a fair way. For example, not providing intentionally subsidies for certain products. And so, unfortunately, that tends to happen. We've seen it in the past where some countries impose huge tariffs. If we look to Europe, for example, I lived there in the 90s, 6 years when I was working there, and you can see even today, there's few American-made cars that are imported into Europe, in part because the tariffs are so significant. It's difficult to address all of those issues with one general concept of tariffs. I think tariffs, unfortunately, can and should be used in certain situations, but on an overall basis, of course, tariffs are not positive for any economy, the world trade, and they do produce inflation. So for somebody that's buying I'll use the example of a washer and dryer in the United States imported from Korea that's much cheaper than the local brand. If tariffs go up, obviously they're going to pay more, but at the same time, they will help the middle class in America from continuing to lose a significant number of manufactured jobs. So, like I said, I think in the short term, these tariffs are not going to be helpful to the economy, to inflation. I hope that the United States, with these other countries, they start working very closely together to address the other issues that the tariffs are supposed to somehow impact.
Yes. One thing for which USA is famous is the huge debt that it has as a country, possibly due to the quantitative easing, which started in 1971 with the fiat currency. But people don't realize that part of the debt is internal and is not so important.
Yeah.
How worrying is it a case of the opposition is always worried, whoever the opposition is, but once they are in government, they say not to worry, part of it is internal. What is your opinion? I mean,
Yes.
Is it a serious issue or is something we can live with? Is it the fault of quantitative easing? Why are we doing it? Increasing the debt?
Mr. Kami, there's several reasons why it's happening, but The reality of the matter is, in the recent election, it was not even one of the top 10 significant issues that was discussed, or that the voters pointed out as a significant issue. In part because most people don't understand the impact, don't understand the dynamics of this national debt. The reality is, and again, as a numbers guy, what I look at is the following. Our national budget in the United States is about $7 trillion. We don't have a surplus. We have a deficit of over almost $1 trillion in the current cycle, which means that we're spending $1 trillion more than we're taking in. And on top of that, we have to pay interest on the debt. By the end of next cycle, we will be not only have the outstanding amount of 36 trillion, we will go to 38 trillion. And the year after, we're going to go to 40 trillion. This level of spending and borrowing is not sustainable at all. Yes, there is internal, as you point out, some of this debt is owed by the citizens of the United States, but nonetheless, they also have to get paid, which means that the governments are going to have to be very serious about reducing expenditures because there's no capacity. And certainly based on the vote, the support that Mr. Trump received, there's no capacity to increase taxation. And there's only one way to do it, and that is to curtail spending and make the government a lot more efficient. I think Mr. Trump was benefited by the support, I'm sure you've seen it, of Mr. Musk, who will lead call it a committee, potentially a department of the government, something we call a Department of Government Efficiency, that department is supposed to identify opportunities to reduce expenditures and make the government more efficient. I can tell you firsthand, tell your audience firsthand, that as I worked in the previous Trump administration for 1 year in what we call the Department of Housing and Urban Development, I saw firsthand that there are opportunities to reduce or to improve the efficiency of the government and to realistically begin to look at departments or areas where we can reduce the spending. What's most interesting for me is that when we look at the when we look at the national budget of $7 trillion, as I mentioned earlier, nearly 70% of that goes to entitlements including Social Security, Medicare, which is health care, and so many other things, support for housing, support for food. All the support mechanisms that we have account for 70% of the national spend, not counting interest. Another nearly 20% goes to the national defense. Nearly 20% of our GDP is spent on defense versus, as you know, less than 2% for most European countries. So there's very little money left for other programs, for example, education. So if you got 70% entitlements, 18% defense, there's not much else left to do or to support. And so it is, in my opinion, it's a major issue. It has to be addressed. It is extremely difficult to do so. The political parties that take on this responsibility gain no favors. It's something that, on the other hand, if we don't do anything with, it's going to get much worse.
Yeah. Do you think it's a good idea to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord? As there are plans?
Yes, I'm not sure that I'm enough of an expert to be able to answer that. It would not surprise me if Mr. Trump moves in that direction. But I would say that the challenge we have there, at least based on my understanding of the challenge, in theory, it's very difficult to support withdrawal from that program, which, you know, at a high level, most people would say it's important and needed for the environment, needed for the world. We import so many products from China. And the rules as they relate to China under the Paris Accord are not as stringent. You know, they are allowed to do things and improve their situation environmentally for years to come, whereas in the United States, it's much more demanding, which means additional costs for the producers, additional complexities, additional cost ultimately for the American consumer. So I think one needs to look at the specifics to conclude whether or not it's a good idea. But again, as I mentioned, it would not surprise me if Mr. Trump moves in that direction. The president-elect announced a couple days ago his nomination for the Department of the Treasury. And the individual that he selected is one that is highly regarded. I think as it relates to the currency, I think it's going to keep a reasonable approach to it. I don't think they're going to try to wildly move or manipulate the currency. I think they're very sensitive to the priority, which is inflation, curbing inflation. However, I would also say that the way the economies of the world are moving, it would not be surprising if the dollar strengthens some. But I don't expect it that they're gonna go out of their way to increase the value of the dollar. And as far as the dollar as a world currency, I think that will remain for quite a while to go.
Yes, I agree with you. We had the chance to speak for an hour, or not an hour, half an hour, and exchange views. Yes. Since we're having problems with the transmission, I would like to
Sorry about that.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure seeing you and talking to you.
Thank you.
We keep in touch. We have a common purpose.
Yes, please.
Promotion and
Yes.
preservation of the values of Hellenism. Thank you very much, Mr. Logothetis. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate everything you do. And feel free to call me with regards to your effort in Switzerland and on the Hellenic Fund. Anything that I can help with, I would be delighted. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye-bye.